Here with me now is Pete Pace from Goldman Sachs. Pete, thanks so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Christy. Good to be here.
So tell me a little bit about how you served, what branch of the military you were in, and what your journey was.
I joined the United States Marine Corps in 1998 after finishing my engineering degree at Northwestern University, where I participated in the ROTC program. When I joined in '98, I went to Quantico and went through basic training and then became an infantry officer. Served until 2004 when I got out and went on to business school and transitioned into civilian life.
And Marines run in your family?
They do. My dad was a Marine for the better part of 40 years.
So you moved around a lot then?
I did, every 2 years until I settled in Chicago after I got out in 2004. So 10 years, which is a long time for me.
So when you came out in 2004, what was the thought process about how you transitioned then back into civilian life?
It was an interesting time. I was a captain, and as I mentioned, an infantry officer. There was a hot war going on in Iraq. There was a lot of activity in Fallujah and other places, and I was among the first of my peer group to transition out. And it was interesting because I had made the decision based on a couple of family factors and just things that were important to me to make the change from being a Marine to being a civilian. And the education process for me was there wasn't a lot of paradigm. There wasn't a lot of examples of people who had made that transition during that time of war. So I was a little bit surprised to find myself educating people on the civilian side about kind of what it was that I actually did, what my job involved. People saw infantry officer at time of war and figured all I did was, go out and blow stuff up and give orders and follow orders. And it was really a lot of education, a lot of exciting opportunities to educate people about what it was that I did and what my Marines did and how that would be valuable on the civilian side.
Was it slightly overwhelming for you as well? And what kind of skill set did you say that you could bring to the table?
There was I was fortunate that I figured it out fairly quickly. I remember doing my first business school interview, and I interviewed with a professional staff member as opposed to a student. Some schools do students, some schools do admission staff. And the admission staff people really wanted to focus on the bullet points of my resume, and this is my very first resume, and so it read like you might expect a military resume to read, like here's where I was, here's what I did. And there's not really a culture in the military of building up your own accomplishments. You do your job, and every once in a while you get an award, and then your uniform reflects your history and you have a reputation. I was underprepared for what was expected of me in terms of presenting those skills in a vacuum to somebody who didn't know me as a means to getting an opportunity. When I spoke to students, however, it was a very different thing. It was a much more immediate connection. They were closer to me in age. I think there was a sense that they were not contributing to what was happening in the world, and there was a much closer kinship and much more immediate relationship. So I kind of bridged those two gaps and quickly realized that what the students were jealous of, if that's the right word, in a time when there was a lot of danger in the world, I could just translate that to an education for the admissions people. So the admissions people would typically expect that I worked in a very rigid environment, that I was the captain and everybody else was the sergeant, and they had to do what I told them to do. And it was a matter of explaining that there's an analogy that a lot of planning goes into military operations, and generals plan, and then captains execute, and sergeants make decisions that actually affect the outcome, because there's a phrase in the military about how no plan survives first contact, and you step off on this well-planned operation, and then stuff happens.
I feel that I think you can help people on two fronts. Let's focus first on what would you say to other veterans who are looking to transition, either going to a university or either into a civilian job? What hints or advice would you give them? I
think the one thing that is required, one piece of advice I typically give is to be patient. It is one thing to be 22, 23 years old, having spent ages 18 through that age in a place where each decision you make has consequence. So a 22-year-old Marine sergeant as a squad leader doing patrols in Afghanistan or Iraq on his own has an ability is required to make decisions under extreme duress in ways that have major strategic implications for the United States of America, because that guy can show up on the cover of the Wall Street Journal or the CNN the next day as having done something really, really good, as we have Staff Sergeant Junta here in today's panels discussing things, or every once in a while they do something bad. I mean, they have strategic importance at age 22. Their actions have consequences. It's not common in civilian society for the 22-year-old to be able to kind of materially affect the outcome of a major strategic effort at a company, any major company. You can't really hurt anybody, literally or figuratively. And so to be patient with their peers who don't have that same experience, and there's a little bit of a gearing, like there can be a transition from everything I do has meaning, I'm serving the greater good, to now I'm a college kid and am I going to go to this party and who cares if I get a B or an A, and trying to assign meaning to the individual decisions of their peers, or at least in their age group.
All right, so then what would your advice be to CEOs or hiring managers or the people at the companies who would be taking on a veteran, and what would you say to them?
I think it's a matter of hiring managers and I'll go to the CEO question. I think it's a matter of the CEOs of most companies. Most companies have a vision. The CEO, if it's a founder, has a vision for what he or she wants his company to be. If it's a president, then that person of a public company, that person has a mandate from a certain number of shareholders or whatever it is that defines what that company really wants to be in its sector, in its community, in the country, in the world. What impact do they want to have? And they usually distill it down to a mission statement or some kind of statement of values. Almost everybody does this. When you break down those kinds of goals into first principles, they're real component building blocks, and you start looking out into the world for people who will have high integrity, have the ability to focus on a mission outside of themselves, see something through its completion, work until the job is done. So work through challenges, be creative in solving challenges that are going to pop up that the CEO is not going to see, but if the CEO has set the appropriate vision, their employees can work towards that vision, even in the context of unexpected developments. That is fundamentally, at its very, very base principles, what your service members are doing on a daily basis around the world. Once you're able to kind of connect those two ideas, you can look past things like, well, that sergeant might not have the undergrad degree I want, or once you identify the kind of people you want, and you go into that population so not every service member is better than in these ways than people who haven't served, but the military has a higher concentration of these people. So if you're a hiring manager and you know these are the kind of people you want, and I show you a pool that has a higher concentration than others, I would think you'd want to spend some time investing in and looking into that and trying to find ways to lure that talent out. It's in your best interest as a commercial operation to get these kinds of people on your side. The veterans are not, there's a lot of statistics about underemployment, but it's not charity. This is in everybody's best interest. You bring these people in, they will contribute. They will make your company a better place, and commercially you'll be much, much better off.
Tell me a little bit about Goldman Sachs initiatives to hire veterans.
Sure. Our firm has been historically led by the military. Veterans have been very well represented in the leadership of our firm since World War II. And a number of the key leaders, kind of touchstone leaders and reference points for us inside of Goldman are people who have served Navy, military, John Whitehead, Sidney Weinberg, people like this. In 2011, we announced an initiative at the firm where the firm committed $20 million to support a variety of veterans causes. And it was a great thing to do. It was kind of us reflecting back on our obligation to give back to this part of our community. And it created a small problem for us right out of the bat, which was once we kind of raised our hand and said, we are giving money into this sector, a large number of what is now today 41,000 not-for-profit organizations reached out to us. Now, I have a day job at Goldman, but my kind of afternoon job at Goldman is co-head of our outreach efforts. So a lot of these phone calls came to me. And we were not prepared for the volume of interest. Obviously, if you raise your hand and say you're willing to write a check, people are interested. But we had not formed in our own mind the vision of how we wanted to influence. Like we said we had money, we said we wanted to help, but we hadn't identified it very well. We very quickly reorganized inside the firm. So there's a veterans network inside of Goldman Sachs that consists of about 300 veterans, where percentage-wise we represent similar to kind of the broader community. But we gave the ability for others, non-veterans, people whose families have served, things like this, to opt in. And now today we sit here with about 10% of our company having indicated and joined this network. So what does that do for us? That gives us a huge amount of scale. And I'm sorry, but I think that the other thing that we did really well was we kind of realized that we couldn't boil the ocean. There's these 41,000 opportunities to do good, and they're all good people doing good stuff. But there were, we really wanted to focus our efforts, and so organizing around that and kind of figuring out which pots we wanted to boil as opposed to trying to get the whole thing done.
So do you find that more companies are following that lead now in the almost 10 years that you've been back into civilian life? Do you find that more companies are taking this initiative to hire more veterans? I think
so. I think it's a good thing to say. It's an easy thing to say. It becomes a bit of a challenge to follow through on, and it's not necessarily the civilian side's part. There are some issues with how there are issues with how the federal government does things very simply, like privacy laws, where the government and the VA cannot publish a list of people who are leaving the service. So even though I left in 2004, there was no box for me to check to say, yes, hi, my name's Pete, I have an engineering degree, I was a Marine, and I'm interested in hearing from employers who would want to hire people like me. There's no option, there's no way to opt into that pool at the exit interview level inside of the Marine Corps. So what happens is, or any military service, so what happens is you run through a process where they teach you how to write a resume, and it's okay, but it's kind of lowest common denominator. And you have interested parties on the outside, but there's no direct connection. And so you find yourself bridging, again, one pot as opposed to trying to boil the whole ocean. So that's why efforts like this are really significant. Seeing states step up and seeing companies step up, and the clamoring from the demand side on the civilian sector, I think, is really driving that conversation to a place where I think in the next couple of years there's real opportunity for change.
And it's great to see. Pete Pace, thanks so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Christy. It was good to be here.